believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Brendes, also known as Ricky Brands, and a great episode for you today. Today we have returning guest, somebody who I truly enjoy chatting with and talking to about everything and anything, Dr. James Lyons-Weiler. He's been on the show a few times. He's also been on the Union of the Unwanted, my other roundtable discussion show I host with Charlie Robinson, Midnight Mike, and Sam Tripoli. So please check out that show, which is available on all the audio platforms for podcasts and Rockfin and Odyssey for video platforms. And Dr. Jack and I, and that's what his friends call him, Dr. Jack, we talk about what you need to know about COVID, what's still going on, all the important stories you're not hearing about in regards to Big Pharma, COVID, the vaccine, and much more. And we go into a lot of other different areas, so it's a really fun discussion. But obviously, I think the COVID thing is something that from time to time we still need to talk about because there are things still going on. So enjoy this podcast. Of course, if you do enjoy this podcast, this is a value for value show. If you get some value out of this, please consider giving some value back. It doesn't have to be financially. I know many of us are in shitty financial situations, but if you can support the show financially, please consider donating via PayPal. I have a Patreon page, which you can donate as little as $1 a month. And that's all it takes to be a part of the Patreon podcast. Once a month, I do a podcast with my Patreon supporters and release it as an episode. And you can donate as little as $1 a month to be a part of that. And if everyone who listens to the podcast donated as little as $1 a month, I could do this full time. So that shows you that there's no amount too little if everyone contributes. And just think about how many things cost $1 in your life. Very little, and very little that actually gives you some type of value. So less than a cup of coffee, you can help keep the show going. We also have a merch store with tons of new logos and tons of new merchandise, so please check out the merch store. And you can find all these links on the rippleeffectpodcast.com. Also, if you want to go directly to the merch store, you can go to the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com, and you'll see a lot of my merch on many of my video episodes. You'll see me wearing the hoodies or drinking out of the mugs. And please consider going to the merch store and just checking out what we have. You might need a tank top, or a new mug, or cup, or kids' clothes, or a V-neck, or something that we offer. So please consider going there and checking out what we have, and hopefully you find something you like. Other ways of supporting the show is I have a crypto wallet. So if you want to send Ethereum or Bitcoin, you can find those addresses on rippleeffectpodcast.com. Just click on support and you'll find those links to my wallet. Also, check out the Ripple Effect Podcast on Rockfin, which is a video platform like BitChute, YouTube, Odyssey. But we get crypto just for you guys watching and listening to the podcast there. So please check out rockfin.com. There's tons of great content creators that I'm sure you know and love. And we all have tons of free content. This podcast is always free on Rockfin. But if you really like the platform, you want to sign up for the premium content, you can do that. Or you can just use it as a YouTube alternative and just enjoy all the free content and content creators for free without signing up. And they also have an app, so check that out. The last few ways of supporting the show is the University of Reason, which is online courses that can help you get the most value out of your skills, teach you some new skills, hook you up with a community that can really help you find your true purpose in life and better understand yourself and the world around you. And Dr. James Lyons-Weiler, aka Dr. Jack, he also has a similar type of online university called IPAC, which will be in the show description also. And you'll learn a little bit more about IPAC on the show. And after the show, he asked me to ask my listeners if there's any specific courses you guys would like to see, or share some suggestions about people who could possibly help him teach some courses. So that's about it. If you can't support the show financially, like I always tell you guys, please just rate, review, tell people about the show, tweet the show, whatever social media platforms you're on, share the show, and that helps fight against the algorithms that are censoring shows like mine. And I'm not on YouTube, so if you guys want to upload any of my episodes onto YouTube, please feel free. If you want to upload clips, please feel free. After being censored on YouTube, I don't think I'll ever go back. I do have a clips channel, which is neglected due to a lack of time, but this is a open source show, so feel free to upload clips on YouTube or upload full episodes, and hopefully you don't get kicked off YouTube like I did. Thanks again, guys, from the bottom of my heart. Enjoy this conversation, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. What stories and what topics should people be paying attention to that might be suppressed or they might be unaware of?
Right. So people may not remember because we are all so distracted by so many things, such as Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. We're distracted by things like Ukraine, even though that's a very important topic, not to minimize that at all. And we're also distracted by the the Supreme Court leaking out this draft decision, right, of the ruling of our lifetime that will bring people out into the streets rioting, the abortion issue. Okay, and the timing is suspect, given that a couple of months ago, FDA attempted to collude with Moderna and with Pfizer, specifically to get approval for the COVID-19 vaccines for kids under the age of 5. And really fascinating, right? We started with emergency use authorization, and it was like, even though they had this Operation Warp Speed, we really gave them some good pushback on, no, you just can't approve this thing. We really have to see the data, including Del Brigtree and his team at ICANN, making sure that they use saline placebo. They didn't want to do that. They said they didn't want to do the animal studies at all to test for pathogenic priming and antibody-dependent enhancement. We pushed back on that. They decided to do those studies. Those studies weren't any good, but they went ahead anyway. Then you remember that they tried to slip in this, oh yes, by the way, we have approved a version of the Pfizer vaccine, right? And this formal approval being different than the emergency use authorization, we gave pushback on the reality of that. So up and down with the news cycles. A month ago, or a month and a half ago, they failed to bring enough support forward that they could justify, hey, let's approve of this vaccine for kids under 5. And I want to remind everyone, kids under 5 don't get COVID. Kids under 5 don't die from COVID. They don't get serious COVID. And if you look at the age distributions, it's absolutely child abuse to try to impose a vaccine, experimental one at that, but a vaccine on kids where there's no personal individual benefit. And so on my Substack, Popular Rationalism, which by the way is extremely popular right now, I have over 10,000 reads per article.
Wow.
I have an article, The News Cycles to Shock and Distract You, Why You Need to Stay Hyper-Focused on the FDA for 1 month, and that is this month. So the narrative, which I wrote to you, Ricky, about, and thanks for having me on to help keep people focused on this. The narrative was, hey, we have this, it gives them the opportunity to protect other people. Well, let's use children to protect other people. And that's actually against the Code of Federal Regulations. You can't use a medical experimental drug or experimental vaccine. You can't use a non-experimental vaccine on a child to protect other people, because the Code of Federal Regulations specifically says there has to be individual benefit to that person. And this individual benefit clause is also embedded in the Code of Federal Regulations that are written to protect pregnant women and children, especially infants. We're talking about kids under 5, from any kind of biomedical research experimentation. And so what the FDA did was they said, well, we have this We have the data, but the data are not sufficient. So they made some headlines. They said, go back to the drawing board, Moderna and Pfizer. The data are not sufficient. Well, but we'll have to revisit this in June. Well, June is exactly when you should revisit it because people are starting their summer vacations, so they're really distracted. And pile a couple of news stories on, like Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, make a big deal out of Roe v. Wade. Maybe there'll be a ruling on it, and people are further distracted. Anything to bury the truth. Well, I'll tell you right now, folks, and I want you to, this is your job. Your job is to tell this to your congressmen and your senators. If you're in the sound of my voice, you have to email them, you have to call them. There is no way that they can produce data to show that the vaccine is appropriate for kids under 5. And here's why. Number one, even in adults, the vaccine does not reduce the transmission. Even in adults, the vaccine does not prevent COVID-19. Even in adults, right? So in the population where it's supposed to be protected, it doesn't stop the virus at all. In fact, Dr. Fantini of France has very convincing evidence in a study that shows that people that have antibodies against the Wuhan type 1 virus, the strain that was originally found in China, that's what the vaccine is based on. If you have those antibodies, ever since Beta variant, we've had antibody-dependent enhancement. And he showed this computationally with computational molecular biology, the way that the antibodies interact with the protein, the spike protein, and wrap proteins in our cells, the ACE2 receptor, that antibody protein complex just opens up, cracks open our cells like an egg. And it just opens it right up much more easily than the Wuhan virus did. So we have these vaccines cannot work on people age under 5 because they don't work on adults. They actually might make it worse for these kids, and we'll start seeing problems. Further, if there is antibody-dependent enhancement, like Dr. Fantini says that there is, then we're going to start seeing COVID-19 symptoms in kids under 5. And when that happens, right, when that happens, then they'll say that the virus mutated and can now infect kids under 5. Right, and it is now it's more transmissible, et cetera. When kids under 5, they'll blame the virus, they won't blame the vaccine. And then I haven't even gotten to the important part. That's just the baseline. You need to tell your congressman that we know that this vaccine causes myocarditis at an unacceptable rate. We know that there's thrombolytic events. We know that there's clotting disorders. We know that there's brain events, the neurological conditions. And when these kids start getting these side effects from the vaccines, this will be the end of the vaccine program, because they will intend to mandate it for all kids before school age, and we'll see strange, unusual health effects in kids that we've never seen before, and they will explode the vaccine risk-aware community at the cost of these kids' health. There's nothing to be celebrated here. This is a disaster that's in the making, and we're going to have parents that right now are saying they're waiting in line. If you read the news speak, it says frustrated parents want this vaccine for their kids. I don't know any parent that wants this vaccine for a kid under 5. There's no reason, there's no benefit to their own child, so they know it instinctively. Also, the fact that the vaccination event, now we know there's definitive proof, and you know me, Ricky, I hardly ever use the word proof in science. There's definitive proof that under the right circumstances, this mRNA sequence itself can be written into the DNA of the recipient of the vaccine. We don't know how frequently, we don't know where in the body. We know that these microparticles in the vaccine go everywhere. The lipid nanoparticles that carry the mRNA, they go everywhere in the body. What does it mean to change the DNA of someone who's a year old, or 2 years old, or 3 years old, or 4 years old, or 5 years old? That's very different than changing part of the DNA of someone who's 50 years old. And so there were no studies whatsoever on this reverse transcription that happens and rewrites the DNA of our bodies. And because the lipid nanoparticles go everywhere, there are certain cells in our body that make the reproductive cells, like the sperm and the egg. And we have no idea if that's going to now, in children, get into the cells that actually create the sperm and the egg, and what that's going to do to the reproductive potential, what's it going to do to the biology of their children. So this is the time to stand up. It's don't relax. Don't think that this is something that is just, oh, another vaccine for children. But if that wasn't enough, my understanding, Ricky, is that if they pass this will be the first vaccine that's mandated for children that's not related to school entry. That means that the homeschooling is not a solution for this. If they mandate this for all children under the age of 5, independent of school entry, they will then set a legal precedent for the federal government to mandate a vaccine for all vaccines for children under the age of 5, mRNA or not. We're talking hepatitis B, we're talking varicella, chickenpox, we're talking MMR, we're talking every single vaccine, Tdap, DTaP series, everything that they have that they want to do. And you know they have 170 vaccines that are in the queue being developed to be injected into humans. They really are going for broke with this. So we cannot have not just approval of the vaccine. We can't have a mandate. We can't have a mandate with exemptions. We just can't have it approved. We cannot allow that to stand. And that's why I wanted to come on and tell your people, hey, this is up to you guys.
Yeah, I'd like to get your take on some of my opinions, or not my opinions, but some of the things I've been kind of thinking about in regards to this topic. So the Roe v. Wade topic is interesting because I've heard some links or a theory that links what's going on with that to the vaccine mandates, and this idea that possibly they could be using this ruling to eventually, mandate, be able to mandate vaccines, right? So they would remove Roe v. Wade. It'd be one less, I guess, bump in the road to eventually mandate vaccines. Because, I mean, let's be honest, like most people aren't consistent with their views, because if you're my body, my choice in regards to abortions, you should also be my body, my choice in regards to vaccines. And, so if you remove Roe v. Wade, then maybe that does open a door to an easier path to mandating vaccines. I've also heard the theory that the timing is also just to kind of work people up before midterms and all this political stuff, because I guess the left kind of feels like there's a lack of passion on their side. They're not that passionate about Ukraine, and they're not you have to make the other side the enemy. And the right now is pretty passionate because they're seeing what's going on in schools. They were upset about this transgender thing, and all the stuff that they're pushing in public schools. Are also they were upset about masks and vaccines, about going back to universities and stuff. So it kind of worked up some of them to get passionate and politically involved and aware. So I've heard the theory that this was a way of trying to get the left back in like the driver's seat and worked up, so then to make sure that when election time comes, that they're out there voting and protesting and being heard. So but in regards to Roe v. Wade and a possible I guess larger agenda of being linked to future vaccine mandates, do you subscribe to that? Does that make sense to you, or do you think no?
Yeah, that's absolutely what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have a news cycle that's going to cause societal disruption. And that societal disruption is sufficient to bury, and behind the scenes and behind the smoke screen, right? Roe v. Wade may or may not even be ever affected by this. This is a hint of a rumor. What they leaked was a hint of a rumor, even though it's a written position. These justices write things all the time. Okay. So this is how the human mind codifies what I think I might say. I'm a writer, I'm an author. I can't tell you how much I've written that I haven't published, right? If you published everything that you're writing, you're not really critically evaluating what you're saying. So this is a draft. It's a draft. It doesn't mean that it's real. It carries no legal weight whatsoever, but it does have the same societal and social effect of, inspiring people to take up political arms, so to speak. And that's exactly what I'm saying. And so all of the issues that are politicized. Of all the issues that are politicized, the vaccine mandate for kids 5 and under will be the last thing on people's minds. And you made my point. You've made my very point. We need to invert our focus, right? So they come after us and they say, Roe v. Wade because women's rights. Okay, well, what about the women who don't want their children to be infected with, a live mRNA biological molecule that can change their DNA, that can alter their health trajectory for the rest of their lives? I was just at an event in Columbus, Ohio, and Dr. Peter McCullough was there. I was speaking, he was speaking, others were as well. And he pointed out something that I pointed out in April 2020 in my pathogenic priming research. This protein, this spike protein, is one of the most dangerous proteins, if not the most toxic thing that we have ever injected into our bodies. It induces autoimmunity in so many ways. Right, so if you go to the scientific literature and you look up that paper, I warned against pathogenic priming, both from injection and infection. And a lot of people who follow me are saying, well, no, maybe we want the infection to give natural immunity. Sure, you get better long-term immunity from the infection for sure. But that's another exposure to pathologic proteins. Now, the spike protein has evolved immensely, right? So go back to the point where I said Omicron is no longer Wuhan, and the antibodies that you produce against the Wuhan vaccine are useless against Omicron. They can't update the vaccine in time. The virus has proven itself to be able to evolve away from the selection due to the selection process, that vaccination against whatever spike protein they're vaccinated against. And so it's going to be an eternal chase, and no one's getting long-term immunity. So it'll come to the point where, okay, we got to get it every year, then every 6 months, and then every 3 months, and you're vaccinating all the time, which is a dream come true for those who make money off of vaccines. But the specific question that you asked, Ricky, the politicization, I absolutely condemn it, but we have to use the political machinery to stand up and say no. We have to say, we know what you did last summer. We know what you did the summer before. We absolutely have to stand firm and say, not one more, not a single more vaccine on the schedule until you can show us that you're actually doing bona fide vaccine safety research using not other vaccines as a control for these other vaccines, not just doing safety studies for 2 weeks or 5 weeks and then shutting it down and vaccinating both the control group and the placebo group, but you're doing large-scale randomized prospective clinical trials so we know the full health outcome, the long-term health outcome, and no one can deny it when we see it. The way they have it right now is post-market surveillance studies. After it's on the market, after it's been done to millions of people, no, those results are reported to bears that anyone can report it, so it's not real. No, you can't infer causality from correlation, so it's not real. That's what they have. They think they have it in the bag, right? And we have to, this is where we stand firm and say, no, the mRNA vaccines will not go into children under the age of 5. And if you are not able to simply go to the browser after this podcast, find your congressman, find your senator, and say, you appreciate that there's a lot of things going on. Ask them specifically, please don't write back to me with some platitudes about vaccines being shown to be safe and effective. Listen to me. Tell them to listen to you on this point. And you want to address this very point, that mRNA vaccines are not beneficial to children under the age of 5. Without benefit, there can be no rational use of this vaccine on the population.
Well, the thing that, I would take it one step further. You're talking about the studies and how the studies are BS. I would say even if the studies weren't BS, even if they had good studies showing that this vaccine helps, it still wouldn't matter, because the truth is the kids aren't at threat. There's no threat to the kids by this virus. So, or this disease. So, because the thing is, like, and again, like, people are kind of mixing the two. Like, you can test positive for a virus that is having zero effect on your body. Doesn't mean you have the disease. We should be fighting or helping people who are a threat to the disease, not just a virus. We just picked the virus, tested everybody for it, and said, let's stop the spread of this virus, even though the majority of people who are testing positive for this virus don't have the symptoms, which means they don't have the disease. So it's not a threat to many people. So I would argue that the vaccine, even if shown to have some effect against this disease, the truth is it's not even necessary, because one, we're not in a state of emergency. We shouldn't be. So there should be no emergency authorization for I tell people all the time, I'm like, look around. I'm like, isn't it crazy this vaccine still has emergency authorization? Do you feel like you're in an emergency? I'm like, look around. Are we in a state of emergency? I'm like, so why do they still have authorization for this? So it's absolutely nonsense. Children they traumatize people. They scared people to the point where they're still, I think on the High Wire, maybe it was the High Wire, I don't know which show I was watching, where they were interviewing people on the street on why they were still wearing masks. And it wasn't for any logical explanation. It wasn't for some well thought out or well researched opinion. It was because they are afraid, and they're still afraid. And until they fully feel safe, they just feel better wearing it. So it's all about how you feel, and it's about dealing with that trauma that the news and the politicians and everybody else and Big Pharma and everybody who scared the crap out of everybody should be blamed for. Because these people are dealing with trauma now. They're dealing with real trauma. And then the other thing too is like, you still see people in commercials and stuff talking about pregnant women getting this. I'm like, pregnant women can't even have sliced ham, okay, because of nitrates. And you're telling me you recommend women not to have sliced meats, okay, but it's okay to take a mRNA experimental, based on bullshit BS studies, a vaccine, like that's okay. You're recommending that, even though we have no long-term studies or anything. Like, it's complete nonsense. And this topic, it's a topic that I feel like prior to 2020, people like yourself and Dell and Dr. Brian Hooker and so many other people were taught, and so many people that other doctors I would talk to, maybe not so much directly about vaccines, but just the issues with modern medicine and the influence of Big Pharma. We would talk about this issue, and people just didn't care. It wasn't something that affected their everyday lives. And then people kind of got more aware of how corrupt the peer review study system can be, how much influence Big Pharma has on the media and government, and yet, like, we're falling for it again. We're forgetting about the issue, thinking it doesn't exist or it went away, while like you said, there's still things going on. I think also the concern about the whole lockdown thing, and I'd love for your opinion on this, but it almost seems like it was a test run for globalism. For a long time, people have talked about New World Order. Can one government really control the whole world? Can one group of people or one organization really control? It's like, well, if you haven't learned anything from 2020, apparently you can, because everybody was getting basically information from the same people, molding their policies based on a small group of people or organizations. And it's like you had everybody just following along, and it blew my effing mind that it's like, and that's why people felt like, oh, it couldn't be a conspiracy, because how would every country be falling for it? It's like, well, if every country is getting information or money from the same influential people, then everybody's getting the same information. They're gonna react the same way. Plus, a lot of the superpowers, like the U.S. and the U.K., like a lot of other countries, kind of follow our lead. So we go in one direction, they go in the same direction. So it's and then I think one thing I remember talking about James Corbett, and I'll you can tell this topic just it's one of the few topics that gets me so worked up that I can't stop talking. But when I remember talking to James Corbett, and when I was talking to James Corbett about his Bill Gates documentary, which was phenomenal, I believe it was 3 parts, and we were talking about this, about how I'm like, was there anything that you weren't aware of, that you learned from researching Bill Gates for this documentary? And he talked about how, like, he knew he was influential and he had, his octopus legs were everywhere and touching everything and influencing everything, but he didn't know to what extent. So I think that's the other reason why you get so many countries all kind of, being influenced by the same policies, because I don't think we were, or many people were aware of the influence of people like Dr. Fauci, the World Economic Forum, Bill Gates, and now people are at least more open to the idea that Bill Gates isn't just the tech guy who created Microsoft, who is trying to save the world in poor countries or whatnot. So you want to jump on any of those many points I attempted to make?
No, that's fine. I followed track, and I'll comment on all of them. So your first point was that you would go even further because there's no emergency right now, even if there is some benefit in terms of reducing transmission and so on. That there's no emergency, and so let me just parse that for a moment, because this is a distilled message after months of thinking about it and tracking. What I'm saying is, keep your eye. We have a watchdog group that works on these things, okay? And they're saying you've got to keep your eye on FDA, and that the winning message is that there's no benefit. And in reality, what you said was the exact same message. It's not, I would even go further. What you did is you spelled out some of the examples where there's no benefit. So people say to me, Dr. Jack, you got to slow it down. You got to say things more simply. Look don't argue the elements, people, the nuanced points. Okay. What margin are we shaving by having a vaccine? Is it 10% or 20? No, there is no benefit to these 5-year-olds and below. There's zero benefit. Okay. And that zero benefit is zero benefit because they're not measuring the right outcomes. It's a sliding scale. There's no benefit in reduction of transmission. There's no benefit in the diagnosis of COVID-19. There's no benefit in reduction of serious COVID-19. And there's no benefit in reduction of deaths. Okay, so what is the benefit that they're claiming? They're claiming that antibodies to the Wuhan 1 virus itself is evidence of a benefit. But antibodies are not the best measure of immunity by any means. It's the T cells, the memory T cells that are cytotoxic against cells that are producing the specific variant that you're infected with. Wuhan 1 doesn't exist anymore. So if you can get this straight, there is no benefit to these children. This is one of those moments in time where it's absolutely crystallized, no benefit. And they'll say, yes, well, there's antibodies that are produced. Tell them in your phone call, in your email, in your message, antibodies to Wuhan 1 are irrelevant. They don't count because Wuhan 1 is extinct. All they are vaccinating against is the spike protein, and that spike protein has evolved so far away that those antibodies are not effective against Omicron. Now they're going to say in the studies, yes, we saw that they bind to Omicron. So they bind to Omicron, but we already know it doesn't prevent transmission. So why are you bothering to measure that it binds to Omicron? When I just told you that Dr. Fantini says that binding to Omicron is going to make it more likely to enter a human cell. So you see, they're not using the right outcome measure in the clinical studies. So start your messaging with, there is no benefit. There are no antibodies produced against Omicron that are specific enough to Omicron to be useful for these kids. You also mentioned, Ricky, on top of that, you said, hey, this thing is unsafe. I said that too. You could go into safety if you want. You can bring up the thrombocytopenia, you can bring up the clotting disorders, you can bring up the myocarditis. Go in and tell them everything you know about that. The real safety issue here is that kids are going to start getting COVID-19. I'm predicting right here and now, if they start vaccinating kids against COVID, a ton of them are going to start to get COVID before their second dose in the series. These are the people that they removed from the clinical trials. Right? Pfizer, right from the beginning, we have 95% efficacy. James Lyons-Weiler, a month later, no, I recalculated it, your efficacy is 75% because you removed everybody from the study that got COVID after your first shot, but before your second shot. So what's going to happen, Ricky? Kids are going to start getting COVID. You want to see kids in hospitals where they're going to ventilate them? You want to see that? You want to see people on the streets? Get my kid out of the hospital. They have my kid. You can't see him. Sorry, they've got COVID. Now there's a message that's going out saying Omicron's just as dangerous as Wuhan 1. That's baloney. Baloney. So they're going to blame the vaccine injuries. They're going to blame the sickness. And by the way, right now the kids already have the antibodies. There's something like over 75% of teenagers are walking around with natural immunity. 75%. Okay. So kids are already exposed. They might develop antibodies if they get multiple repeated natural exposures without showing a single symptom, right? The real safety issue is, are these kids going to start dying from COVID in the hundreds of thousands? That's the real. And when you see that happening, and you know that it happened after the vaccine program, Fantini, look it up on my Popular Rationalism Substack, Fantinia. Fantini, you know how to spell it. Listen, right now, Twitter and I are in a staring contest because the day after Elon Musk said that this was a free and open forum, they banned me. I can't get into my Twitter account because over this Fantini result, over my Substack. So come on, people, write to Elon Musk on Twitter and tell him to set at Life Biomed Guru free. Follow me on Twitter at Life Biomed Guru. Follow me on Substack and share my Substacks for me because I can't do it. My hands are locked. I've got a screenshot of hey, you're shut down until you confess. You confess that you violated community standards. That's coerced speech. I'm not going to do that. So we're in a staring contest, and it's Twitter or me on freedom of speech, okay? But I'm telling you right now, I'm predicting hundreds of thousands of deaths due to COVID in children following the vaccination program if they approve it. Let's do this for the kids. The other thing you brought up, Ricky, was global authoritarianism. The global communist threat is absolutely real. These globalists want to come and they want to run your life where you don't own anything and you're happy. We already know about that from Klaus Schwab. The question is, how are they going to get into all the countries? Well, they found that the easiest way to authoritarianism is, as you said, scare everyone and then promise that you're the savior with public health. Two things I want to point people out to. The first is that the World Economic Forum just opened up a branch in Detroit, Michigan last year. Here's my prediction what's going to happen with the World Economic Forum getting involved in our society. There will be people that walk around like the Taliban, and they will go into stores and they'll say, that was made with slave labor. You can't sell that. They'll start identifying local businesses that they want to protest and shut down. If it gets violent, all the better. So right now they're educating people that live in Detroit, Michigan. You know what the racial profile is in Michigan, the disparity between blacks and whites? It's huge. So these are going to be African Americans that are trained by the World Economic Forum to go into businesses in and around Detroit to say, you cannot sell that product that was made with slave labor. So they're going to want to take over our economy by policing over this. I'm against slave labor. I'm absolutely 100% against slave labor. And, you know, one of the conundrums of, as you know, green energy is how are they going to do all these electric vehicles and justify the kids in Africa that have all these neurological disorders and the adults that are working for pennies with no health care, right? Because of the poisons and the toxins used in getting the rare minerals, the rare earth minerals out for their batteries. Okay, that's the first thing is, hey, World Health Economic Forum is in the US. They have landed in Detroit. Second, Jody Dean, Department of Political Science at Hobart and William Smith College. If you haven't seen her lecture that was given in December 2019 on the eve of the pandemic, that was given at the University of Toronto. It was a Franklin lecture. To a round of applause from the audience, she said that we don't want to join the serfdom under Jeff Bezos and the capitalists. Instead, the only option that we have is neo-communism. She said it out loud. She said it with slides. She used Lego figures to make it warm and fuzzy. She used memes like Chairman Meow to try to tell people that this is a warm and fuzzy. When you think of neo-communism, she said, don't think about Joseph Stalin. Don't think about Mao Zedong. Think about a warm and fuzzy communism that's actually going to take care of every one of your needs for you. What she didn't realize is that I was watching, and what I saw was a Lego figure that was something that was nice, a warm and fuzzy Lego figure, right next to her attempt, very gauche and grotesque attempt to threaten bloodshed. She had a knight in shining armor with a nice silver sword, Lego figure. So she's getting into the infantile brain of Americans, the youth who love Legos, to say, you know what, your parents are so behind the times, they don't understand new technology. We get it. We understand that. We know you don't like your parents. Come on over to communism, because you know what? We know you can't find a job. And these guys, the people that have worked for 30, 40 years in an open and free society, they're the ones that have all the houses and the land. They enjoy these privileges. Privileges? No, I'm owning my property. I'm spending my money, right? But you young people, we understand that, and they're not going to give it up. It's all their fault. So we need to give it to you. That's what we're going to do. We're going to start with your phone. I'm going to start with transportation. We're going to make sure you have free transportation. Oh, you want some housing? We'll put you in rat cages right next to the railroad tracks so that you can go in and out of the city as you want. By the way, the only thing that this Jody Dean professor said, the people that are going to be difficult to actually get to join on this, they live in the hinterlands. Watch for the word hinterlands. They live away from the cities. They're lost in the wilderness, and it's our job to go save our brethren there. Yet she said literally the only problem is that they haven't seen the light of communism yet. And it's her job. It's her life mission. Now, she's a liar. She's a bold-faced effing liar, because she says that she's part of a socialist party, a socialism. But she's not. She's a bred through and through communist. Now, Ricky, and I'm a recovering liberal from upstate New York. I'm a true blue liberal, right? But I'm not really. I took a political survey about, 8 years ago. I'm right in the middle on whatever dimensions they measured me on. I'm right in the middle. But Jody Dean, you've got to watch this YouTube video, and I'd love to hear what you think about it after you watch it, because it's absolutely horrifying that then the University of Toronto stood up and gave her a round of applause for introducing communism in a Franklin lecture, December 19th, 2022. So that's my thought about the authoritarianism. I have one final thought about authoritarianism. It's not the people who seek authoritarianism that are doing anything wrong. That's human nature. I'm not even going to blame them. Every generation, every 100 years or so, that people get this wild idea that they should be in charge of everybody else. It's just part of it's a sickness, but it's what people think that they should do. And that they know better than everybody else, right? It's the people that are, comply. It's the people that don't have the courage to stand up. It's cowardice via compliance. You have to stand up and you have to say, you know what, you're not going to change the rules without my consent. I'm not going to kowtow to these new rules. I'm going to show up at every school board meeting and make sure that you're not teaching a communist agenda in school. I'm going to show up at every single municipal meeting, city hall, and make sure that the rules of my city where I live are not going to change, so that you can more easily implement your communist agenda. You have to show up at your county level and communicate with your state representatives and get involved in that. Because if you don't do it, no one else will. If you're within the sound of my voice, you're just a rare, tiny percentage of people that are waking up to the fact that it's not some far off World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab in some Star Trek outfit. It's absolutely real, and it's here. It's in the United States. So I don't think we should rout them out. I believe in free speech. I think that they should go ahead and have a platform and make your case, but use democracy. Use the characteristics of democracy, the practices and tried and true principles of democracy in the open forum. Stop with the censorship so I can't debate you, right? I've given up on liberal colleges many years ago. So what did I do? Now, if you really want to master this stuff, come over to ipac-edu.org. Ricky, last time we spoke, I think we had like 3 courses and maybe, 24 students. We have 17 instructors and 26 courses. And we're expecting thousands of students to come and learn logic, science, and reason, to learn immunology. I have 107 students in my immunology course, so people can understand what's happening to them with vaccines and viruses and bacteria. You have to take control. You have a duty to learn for yourself and for your family. So you can build receptacles, knowledge receptacles in your brain. So when they try to fit something in that's not based on the reality, that you actually have the technical knowledge to fight back to these technocrats who have chosen public health as their last stand to come after us with totalitarian, authoritarian government. It's absolutely important that you check out the courses. Mark McDonald, he'll be teaching a course, How Not to Be Fooled, right? We're going for broke here. We have philosophy track, psychology track, biology track. To go there, ipa-edu.org. This is the best decision I ever made. We have thousands of students planning on taking these courses, and the other thing is that these courses, it's making a community. The students are starting to ask each other, which courses are you taking next semester? Okay, we don't give any certificates or degrees. We're teaching the heck out of logic, science, reason, analytics. We have a very useful course, How to Read and Interpret a Scientific Study. So when you see a baloney study, you call them baloney studies, okay? You go in there and you can tear it apart yourself. We also have classes on spreadsheets, how to use spreadsheets so you can take public data and present it to officials, so-called representatives, and say, here, so-called officials, and applied biostats. We have course after course after course where you can better yourself to be ready for this fight, be able to stand and defend freedom and liberty, and so that they can't just shove the new technology down your throat or into your skull or wherever it is that they want to put it.
Yeah, and those courses are getting more popular. I will have a link, and I think I have been putting a link in the show description since the last time you're on the show. So if people go to the show description of wherever you're listening to this or watching this, I think Rockfin's the only place where there might be some issues with it being in the show description, because they give you very limited space to put stuff in for the show description. But if you're watching it on Odyssey or BitChute or Rumble or any of the other platforms, it'll be there. And if you're listening to it on iTunes, Spotify, you'll see the link for IPAC, and you're seeing like same thing with my my good friend Richard Grove and the University of Reason, the popularity of that. Thaddeus Russell and the Renegade what is it called? Renegade University. But he actually, I just heard an interview. I think for some reason that I actually reached out to him about coming back on the show. I haven't heard back yet, but for some reason he's detached from that university now, which I thought he started. So I don't know what inside story.
Who was Richard Grove? I haven't heard about him.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll have to link you up with Richard Grove. So Richard Grove I met him some years ago. He was a 9/11 whistleblower initially, is how I got to know him. And then he also started a website called Tragedy and Hope, based on the book. And then he did a podcast called the Peace Revolution podcast. And he's just a really fascinating historian and thinker, and very well known in like the libertarian community. And just a very fascinating guy, and really knows his history. He's been on a couple of the James Corbett documentaries on eugenics and other topics, because he's just very knowledgeable on that. But he eventually started something called the University of Reason, and the autonomy course is a course that's really popular. And similar thing, they teach philosophy, they teach all types of things, and it's growing every year. And I think these type of options are going to become more and more popular as a college degree becomes less valuable, and the information they give you is even less valuable than the degree. Then then I think people are going to look for these alternatives with that really help them better understand the world without all the propaganda that comes with going to a university that they force feed you. So and then he started the University of Reason. He also hosts a show called the Grand Theft World podcast. He's been on my show a bunch, and he's also been on the Union Unwanted. Maybe he's even been on the Union Unwanted one of the times you've been on there. And really fascinating guy. I should hook you guys up and
well, you go ahead and hook us up. So I wanted to say that sounds like a great program, and I want to talk with them. This summer, you mentioned important things about libertarian versus, and others. This summer, we have 2 workshops at IPAC EDU. The first one I want to mention is historic and current threats to the U.S. Constitution. So in this class, I've challenged the instructor to go through the Constitution in a way that really means something to people. In the past, who threatened the Constitution? What did they try to do? How did they try to do it? And what were the issues that were, being challenged? What were the good, important protectors of our rights that are codified in the U.S. Constitution? But that's going to be a fascinating course. That'll last 15 weeks. And then the other one, I'm co-teaching with Bernadette Pager, who informed consent and health freedom. And in this one, Ricky, we're going back to the basics. We're going to read the Helsinki documents. We're going to read the Nuremberg documents. We're going to read the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations. We're going to read the vaccine rights in some of the states, how it's codified. And we're going to have a discussion about where is it codified that you have informed consent, so that people can master these references and start to cite the book to their representatives. Go look up 45 CFR 46 for why you can't do human subjects experiment without informed consent. So it becomes second nature to them. This is going to be another, fascinating experience. We're not imposing a view. We're specifically going to read the same thing the students are reading, maybe offer a couple of interpretations from law journals and so on, and then have a discussion, and we'll talk it out. What does this really mean? How do we interpret this? That's going to be a really popular one. So we're not stopping. We work day after day, night after night to make sure that these courses are, like you said, not just dribbling out little pieces of information. In fact, the immunology students, after a couple of weeks, they said, this is like drinking from a fire hose on information. I've never learned so much. I said, what you want since the lectures are live, what you want to do in the immunology course is, attend the first 5 or 6 lectures and then go back to the beginning and watch the other videos again, watch the previous videos again, because you have access for the rest of your life to these videos. So you can attend the live. There's always question and answers, access to the instructors. You can get your ideas out there and share your ideas and see what other students think about them. It's really healthy and organic. And like I said, it's building this massive community. And so it's the best decision I've ever made. And I'm very, very keen to see everyone sign up for one course. Take one course and you'll want to take them all. So we price them really low. They're only $180 per course. That's like $12 a lecture. And you can access it either live or you can take it on demand. Just go in anytime and get the individual lectures one at a time. We give recommended reading material, webs to related stuff on the website. I mean, we're trying to do the whole 360 degrees of education here. So I'm teaching my heart out and I'm loving every minute of it.
Yeah, I think the community thing is something people really enjoy too. That's something that I've heard a lot from people who were a part of University of Reason. One of the people that were a part of that was actually Matt from Content Safe, who's the guy who do you know Matt? Oh, he created this software that syncs my videos to all my channels. So it saves me tons of uploading time. I don't have to upload each individual video, which is awesome. So it works basically the way that audio works. I can upload my audio to my host podcast location. I use Podomatic, and then they send it to all the other locations. But unfortunately, video, there wasn't any option like that. So Matt, who's also a fan of alternative media and a listener of many of the podcasters that he's helping now, he created this awesome software. So it saves me tons of time. And with censorship being such an issue, YouTube is still, Google and YouTube are still the search engines people use the most. So if you're being suppressed by them, which I am, since I got kicked off YouTube, it's much harder to find my shows and find my channels and all that stuff. So having it on as many other platforms as possible is helpful. So he helps me with that. I'm going to be on Iconic very soon, which is David Icke's platform. My show's on band.video. I started a locals channel and a Substack also because Matt actually is like, why not just start a Substack, and just put your podcast on there. I don't think we started uploading on those channels yet, but hopefully very soon. But yeah, any place that lets you, to me, like that's the thing. I remember when I went on band.video or when I went on like these other, sometimes people have a issue with like certain platforms. And I'm just like, you know what, as long as they let me post my conversations and they're not influencing my conversations, Rockfin or band.video, they're not telling me what I can and cannot say. Why not use the platform then? I'm going to post it there. As long as they let me have these open dialogues and these open discussions, then I'm going to, post it everywhere and anywhere, because the most important thing is just people running into the conversations. And I'm not concerned about who else is on that platform. Maybe it is an echo chamber for these type of people or that type of people. But I'm not an echo chamber. I'm not creating an echo chamber on this show. I'm really open to having discussions. Even like I was on Quite Frankly, which is a really awesome show on YouTube, and Frank's been on my show before, and we were talking about the abortion thing, and it was kind of the hot topic, and I didn't have a super strong opinion, and he kind of did. He had like, oh, you have to draw the line somewhere. I'm like, yeah, I get it, but I'm like, a lot of these things are debatable, right? Because it's like, okay, like women have the right to choose, and then it's like, well, how late do they have the right to choose? And then it's like, once you have certain states that really late in the pregnancy let you have abortions. It's like, well, now it gets a little fuzzy. So my whole point was like, a lot of these things aren't black and white. There's tons of gray area that should be discussed, and if I disagree with somebody, I want to talk to them and know, like, okay, how did you come to this conclusion? What influencing your perspective? And and it's just like a marriage, like I always say, like communication is important, because even if at the end we agree to disagree, we're at least a little bit closer to the middle. We're a little bit closer, or at least have a better understanding. And you humanize somebody if you can understand their logic behind their perspectives. If I just look at somebody as the other or the enemy because I disagree with their perspective on something, it's really easy to just hate somebody and dislike somebody. And then if I sit down and have a conversation with them, like, okay, why do you think this? Let's kind of talk about it and dissect it, and let me explain why I disagree with you. All of a sudden we're just two humans who want the same thing, but might have different perspectives on how we get those things. But we want the same thing. We want a safe environment. We want decent schools for our kids. We want to be able to afford to buy food and go to the grocery store and travel. So we all kind of want the same thing. And so I think it's much, even with people that I completely disagree with, I want to have discussions with them. Because if not, then it's like, what do I gain from just saying they're the enemy? And believe me, it's especially during COVID, it was really easy to just get really upset with people who wanted to mask kids or wanted to vaccinate kids. And it's like, it's really easy to kind of get drawn into like, these people are effing crazy, and you can't swear on the show. The only reason I'm not swearing is because when I have a PhD on the show, I don't want to sound too much like a truck driver.
We got to hang out some more, buddy. You got to hear me in my truck driver mode. I'll put any U.S. Navy SEAL to shame. But so listen, you're a lot like me in that way. Free and open discussion is the foundation of a free and open society. Okay, so if you start censoring people and shutting them down because you disagree with them, you are by definition on the road to being a tyrant. And so, lately, I think you'll find this interesting that lately, my concern is not so much each other, right? So when I come into a political position or political issue, and I want to know what position I might take, my first thing is to protect my thoughts as my own. My very first instinct is to say, all right, I'm going to listen to different viewpoints, but I don't want to become an unwitting agent of someone who knows more about the situation than I am, will benefit from me taking their position up by the virtue of me just taking it up. And I'm fighting their fight, and I don't really understand the issues. All right, so this is where you have to become a participant in your own government. This is where you have to want to be part of your own government by and for the people. And you don't have to be an elected official to be part of your own government. Contacting your legislators. Okay, yeah, they're not going to listen to me. Fine, you just divorced yourself from your own responsibility. You just gave up your responsibility. It's not your responsibility to make them listen, but it's your responsibility to communicate to them. All right. So, but lately, let me bring this topic up because it's a really interesting one. The artificial intelligences that are being developed are so powerful that they can nudge you into a particular political position on an issue without you ever knowing it, through multimedia, through what you see on TikTok, through what you happen to see in your ad profile on Amazon or Facebook or wherever you are. And you will swear to God Almighty that that was your idea. You have this belief system and this knowledge structure because you're passively absorbing positions that are highly influential. And the AIs can learn how to manipulate your thought patterns and your processes just on the basis of what you see and the basis on what you hear, without you ever knowing that it wasn't your own autonomous thought. In other words, we can actually right now be programmed, and it happens all the time. It's not so much, okay, there's this advertising agency and they're sitting around the table saying, what will get people to eat more Slurpees, right? To buy and consume more Slurpees. That's bad enough. Now you have an AI that knows where your eyes are on the screen. You have an AI that watches what you click. You have an AI that is actually learning from your behavior what makes you tick and what makes you go left, what makes you go right, what makes you turn to the next page, what makes you stay on a page. Where on the page is a share button? Are you more likely to share? These kinds of things. And they can perfect this to the point where they're manipulating your thoughts and your behavior. That is phase 2 of IPAC-EDU. I'm bringing on board people that are expert in complex systems, experts in neurolinguistics, experts in artificial intelligence, and I'll be bringing on board experts in semiotics and biosemiotics, the use of symbology to convey information. And this is going to be a really fascinating area because everyone has to use this AI approach to manipulate you to compete with their competitors so that they don't go out of business. So the other guys are doing it, so I have to do it too, right? So there's no stopping this. So the question is, if you're a consumer of information through your phone on things like TikTok and Facebook and the news articles that are out there, at what point in time do we tell the difference between being manipulated by a corporation and being manipulated by the AI that's used by the corporation? And the way that humans are with respect to our societies and our civilizations, there's always a local influence first. Once a corporation adopts AI and they see the massive benefits, hey, our sales are up 140%. They're going to turn the AI into managing their own people. So the people and corporations that own the intellectual property for AI are going to be the first victims, so to speak, of how to be a better salesperson, how to be a better secretary, administrator, how to be a better spokesperson, whatever. And it'll appear to be benign because they'll appear to have local benefit. But the emergent pathological aspects of this is that people will, I believe, and you kind of hinted this earlier, talking politics, society will become fractionated in ways that we don't really understand why we can't talk to that person. I don't like that person, but I don't know why. In fact, I hate that person and I don't know why. When they start manipulating us to that point, forget it. Then AIs are running corporations. In fact, corporations are de facto AIs because they can't have empathy. They can't have anything other than a profit motive by law. If they do anything that goes against the interest of their investors, if they're traded corporations, that's illegal. So corporations are in fact AI. So how do we prepare ourselves that when we see information, we can say, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. What kind of mental processes and practices and disciplines do we need to have before we engage in a political discussion that we know that we're coming from practices and principles that are truly autonomous. That is a very difficult challenge. But what we have going for us are the trillions of neurons in our brain and our life experience. And the younger you are, the more easily manipulated you are because you haven't figured out, oh yeah, I got fooled by this before. I know what that is. So this is going to be a webinar series at IPAC EDU. It's probably going to launch in 2023. It's going to be an ongoing webinar series where academics and people in these different areas are giving presentations on these really cool topics, all structured around how to protect yourself from being manipulated by information when it's kind of hard. We're all junkies for information, right? So how do we do that? You know, how do we make sure? Is it meditation? Is it waiting 24 hours before you hit the send button on an email or post? We have to get this out in real time. You're saving the world, remember? Well, wait a minute, are you? Are you saving the world? Am I saving the world? I don't know what I'm doing. What I'm doing is I'm bringing the principles of objective science, logic, and reason that have been hammered out over hundreds of years of debates by people that were smarter than I am, and reflecting on their utility in solving problems in our day-to-day lives today. So watch for that. I'm not sure what the name of that webinar series is going to be, but there's fascinating people IPAC EDU has become a strange attractor for a lot of really smart people doing really interesting things they want to teach. So yeah, watch for that. And Ricky, as you know, I want to see you there.
Yeah, well, it wasn't Dr. Jessica Rose was a part of it, right? IPAC, wasn't she?
No, she was part of she is still part of IPAC, the Research Foundation. So that's a not-for-profit research foundation. But she's the recipient of the Joshua Kuntz Research Fellowship, and most of that money comes from Canada, from Vaccine Choice Canada members. She's a Canadian citizen, as you know, and she's done great work. But everybody wants Jessie to teach virology, but she's so damn busy with everything that's going on. She says she wants to do it, but I can't seem to get time. But we have courses like genetics now, man. We have courses like microbiology, right? So people can get a taste of it, but everybody wants Jessica, and I want Jessica to teach virology as well.
Well,
we'll see if she doesn't. If she can't do it, there's a demand for virology, and we're going to have to get somebody to fill in. But you know, I would love to have her, and she has said yes, just not right now.
Well, in regards to AI, I mean, are you familiar with Zach Voorhees, the Google whistleblower? He was just he's a guy who knows a lot about algorithms manipulating you. Also, and you know, one other person, I think, what's his name, Alan something. He did this video, I reference it all the time, called "Free is a Lie." I'll actually, you know what, I've always, have you watched it before?
No, I haven't, but it's a great title.
I'll play a little bit of it now, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please do.
Always referencing it, and the listeners, I don't know how many of them actually go out of their way to search for it, but I'll play it real quick, just a little bit of it to kind of get a taste of it. But it's really important. It was way ahead of its time because it's a kind of an older video.
I'm not hearing anything.
The number of timeline posts between you and another person.
Let me start over.
And the horizontal axis,
yeah, I can hear it now.
Specifically 100 days leading up to when your relationship status actually changes. So what interests me about this is,
I'll start it over because I didn't realize when I muted it, it was going to mute the video too. I was just trying to prevent some background noise, but I'll play it again because the beginning of it is important.
Yeah, I have seen it, and it's a good one, so I'm going to stick around for it.
This graph, specifically this point on this graph, is the point at which Facebook knows that you have begun your next relationship, whether or not you've explicitly told Facebook that you've begun your next relationship by setting your relationship status. So how does Facebook know this? They know because of these little black dots. Those little black dots are the number of timeline posts between you and another person. And the horizontal axis is days, specifically 100 days leading up to when your relationship status actually changes. So what interests me about this is, when does Facebook know that you're going to start a new relationship within those 100 days? Is it possibly before you know? And perhaps a more important question, who owns this intelligence? Who owns this data? Now, Facebook released this study as part of a blog post, and there were comments on it, and somebody asked this question: is this anonymized data available? And Facebook said, we're sorry, we don't even release anonymized data. It's strictly for our use. So the answer to who owns this data, of course, here is Facebook. So I don't know if you've been following Facebook at all recently, but they just bought a messaging application called WhatsApp for $19 billion. Why was WhatsApp worth $19 billion to Facebook? Well, it's quite simple. What they bought were the mobile phone numbers of 450 million people, but more importantly, the right to eavesdrop on all of their future conversations, should they desire. So you might say, well, okay, so what? Right, Aral, it's fine. It's a product. If we don't like it, we don't have to use it. It's not like these things are essential. Well, I beg to differ. To understand why this is so important, we have to evaluate how our relationship to technology has evolved over the last 30 to 40 years. Now, computers once were these external, cold, impersonal devices that filled up entire rooms, and we had to actually drive to one if we wanted to use it. Today, that couldn't be further from the truth. We wear them on our persons. They can't get more personal than that. We wake up with our mobile phones. We go to bed with our mobile phones. That's very personal. Whereas computers once were disconnected from the world around them, disconnected from one another, and unaware of the world itself. Today, they are always on. They're always seeing. They're always hearing. They have a plethora of sensors by which they can feel the world around them and are aware of the world around them.
Well, I'll pause it, but you get the point, and it's about 35 minutes long, and it's worth watching. And I mean, it's 2014 when this came out. In regards to somebody else who does amazing work on this topic is Dr. Robert Epstein. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but if you have not listened to anybody listening who has not listened to his appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast not too long ago, please check it out. I mean, the amount of information that he shares and the insight and just the knowledge about how we're all being spied on and watched and manipulated is absolutely insane. In regards,
do you see the news down there? Google critic killed in an ironic car accident. Dr. Robert Epstein, age 60, was killed yesterday.
wait, is that new?
I don't know.
Huh.
July 20th, 2014. Couldn't be the same guy. Couldn't be the same guy.
You know what this is about? And if you listen to the podcast, and Dr. Epstein was killed yesterday. So wait, first of all, he wasn't killed. He was on the Rogan podcast, unless they're already cloning people. This is really weird. So
Gotta be a different guy.
This is that's him right there, though.
By Dr. Robert Epstein, PhD contributor. So it's a future. He's struck by Google Street View. All right.
Oh, okay. We didn't finish reading it.
Okay, so it's a joke. All right.
Well, but I will tell you something that is really interesting that people will find they'll hear when they listen to Joe Rogan podcast, is that he was at some type of conference that had a bunch of high-ranked people, and somebody came up to him and said, your life is basically in danger. And and he got a little afraid, but nothing ever happened to him. But what did happen was his wife died in a mysterious car crash. That's what
That's disgusting. I get that all the time, by the way, Ricky. So listen, I wanted to close out with some thoughts about why this webinar series is so important.
I will.
So
one last thing, because
yeah.
I have it open. So Richard Grove, we talked about him. He did a amazing documentary some years ago. This is the trailer for it, but it was 2013. It's called State of Mind: The Psychology of Control. And what I really loved about this documentary, he did it with Free Mind Films, who I've done a bunch of shows with people from Free Mind Films throughout the years, because they did A Noble Lie on the OKC bombing and a bunch of other great documentaries. But this one specifically is really, really good and really, really important. Richard Grove was a big part of writing it and whatnot. And the reason why it's so important is because it goes through history and shows you how the elite have always attempted to control people and have always used these tactics to control people. Right. And you can find this documentary. Right. You can probably find a copy of it on YouTube or Odyssey or many other different places. So I highly recommend people checking this out.
I will certainly do that. I'm looking forward to that. I'll probably watch it tonight because I consume everything in real time. But so Ricky, when I'm interacting with you, I no longer see us as two human beings talking. What I see is a complex neural network, a complex of neural networks interacting with another complex of neural networks through telecommunication devices that we're working on. And each of those entities that are in the room, you, me, these devices, we impose structure on information. So what you're just showing me now is this, the state of mind, the psychology of control. When you watch that, that had a structural impact on your mind. Now, you telling me about that has now transmitted some structural impact on my mind. And part of the fundamentals and elementary of understanding what happens when we learn is that any time you take any information processing unit, whether it's a CPU, a computer program, our eyeballs, our hands when we're playing piano or playing guitar, and you pass information through, you know, you have a major ganglion here, right? You pass information through that kind of a information processing unit. That information processing unit, how it's structured, imposes constraints on the possible outcomes on the other side. That's the level of granularity and detail where we're beginning. This is the beginning of this webinar series. That, and this is well known, constraints on information systems happens at all levels. It happens in neural networks, in computers, it happens in our minds, it happens, like I said, the retina of our brain. You're not going to hear things in using information from your eyeballs. Most of us don't, some do. But the fundamental fact is that those constraints are what can be manipulated. So you're looking at one thing, but you're actually looking at another, and you don't know it. You're hearing one thing, but you're actually hearing another. And an example of that would be subliminal advertising. You're at a movie theater, and all of a sudden you have to get up and you have to go get a soda and a popcorn. And you want it really, really, really salty because you didn't notice that they made you want it really salty. So we understand that this can already happen, that subliminal advertising works. We understand that they can use sex to sell anything, right? Boobs sell anything, and they're commoditized, right? Much to the chagrin of women who feel that that the feminine form should not be used that way, and men too who feel that way. But this webinar series would ideally, the ideal track, if you will, would be a basic course in neural health, where you'll learn neuroscience, neurobiology, and how to keep your brain healthy. That'll give you the background that's necessary to then go in and understand when we talk about synapses and axons and, you know, structures. But then very quickly, you know, all of these speakers, week after week after week, will give presentations on how did consciousness evolve? What about the evolution of language? And what does use of language do to our cognitive processes? Right? How has language evolved? Has it gotten more complex or more simple? And when that happens, what does that do to the culture, the people speaking that language? So we're doing some really high-minded things, all against the backdrop of the better that we understand ourselves, how our brains work, how information can be changed, modified by information processing units that impose structure on those, on what's perceptible. And one of the just academic questions that I'm interested in is, what are the limits of our own perception? I don't mean our eyes and our ears. What is our we have cognition, which is thought process. We have understanding and comprehension, which is really difficult to define. We have knowledge, which is really difficult to define. What are the limits of our species that our ancestors handed to us by the structures that are capable of being formed in our brain? Now, if you talk to a neuroscientist who knows something about learning and how circuits are made and where memories reside and how words and terms are classified in a hierarchical file system in our brain. So that's why when you have semi-aphasia, you might say the wrong word, but it's always something really close to that word, right? That's a file recovery error. You're getting the information, but you just pulled it from the wrong location. So, but I mean something beyond that. Are there ways of knowing things in this universe that our species just can't comprehend, can't even imagine? And what are those? Because I want those, man. You know, I want to know that.
Do you know Dr. Rupert Sheldrake?
Yes.
With his work,
Yes.
I've had him on years ago, and he, he's one of those guys who dive deep into his theories and research, and it makes you think how limited our understanding really is, and how we look at our primitive ancestors like they were monkeys, not just physically but mentally. Like they had very little understanding of the world around us. I'm curious if 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, we're going to look back at us like we were monkeys, like our understanding was completely wrong. And obviously we're limited on based on just our six senses. We are very limited on how we interpret what we see and what we hear and what is reality. That's why I love philosophy, because it asks those bigger questions about, like, what is the nature of reality? What is truth? What is consciousness? What is, all this stuff. It's to me, it's so fascinating, because it really starts putting in perspective how little we actually do know, or how little we do understand. And the placebo effect is always a perfect example of it. I mean, it's something that we know exists. We still have very little understanding to no understanding of how it works and why it works. And the gut, we're learning that the gut is linked to the brain, and it can affect your mood, and it can affect, they're calling it your second brain, and all those things. And so there's so many things about the universe that we think we understand. But guess what? When they were calling thunder the god of thunder, and they would explain waves in the ocean because it was a god of water or whatever it may be, they also thought they understood the way the world worked and the universe. So who knows how far we really are from truth, and what the hell truth really is. So I love these type of discussions and topics.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So the evolutionary biologist, this is someone who I met in numerous meetings in evolutionary biology when I was a young postdoc. E.O. Wilson has a fantastic quote, and the quote is, "The real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology." So you said something very important. Why I'm so motivated to do this is, you said, who knows, maybe in 10,000 years, we'll look back and we'll think ourselves as infantile intellectuals, right? Well, Elon Musk really absolutely wants us to plug in. He said 2 years ago that language is going to be obsolete. We won't need it. We will be a hive-like species where people's thoughts can be shared across the internet. It's interesting he bought Twitter, isn't it? But the point being, it won't be 10,000 years if he has his way. If he has his way, it'll be 5 years. And we will look back at the dark ages when people actually didn't absolutely immediately have their hunger satisfied through distributed knowledge network of desire. I'm hungry, and a drone drops off the very food that you will respond to with maximum contentedness. This is what the globalists have planned. You will desire anything that you don't absolutely you won't have to put any effort into trying to consider what might be satisfactory to you, because everything delivered to you will be optimized perfectly for what you are programmed to want, actually. And the way to invert that then is to alter your senses. So you're eating filet mignon, you're having caviar, but actually it's a hot dog and French fries, and you have no idea. You don't have any clue. Your perception has been so warped and manipulated that you don't know that you're eating toxins. They want to shorten your life because, well, it's not efficient to keep you alive as long as other people, or whatever it is that future generations of oligarchs might think is ethical, because it's for the greater good. And so with Paleolithic emotions, these are our Pleistocene ancestors. These are the hangovers from our Pleistocene ancestors. They include things like, they lead to behaviors like war and rape and violence and aggression. Those Paleolithic emotions, the bad ones. The medieval institutions are the very stultifying ways in which we process information in our society, the formalisms that are semi-ritualistic, the deference to authority by the fact that it is authority. These are problems. And then, of course, Elon's godlike technology. So I have a paper, if people haven't heard about it, it's in a peer-reviewed journal of biological theory. It's Who Are We? And who or what do we want to become? And if you want your mind blown about the depth of evolutionary consequences of adapting gene modification and adapting Elon Musk's technology and Musk-like technology, read that. Who are we and who or what do we want to become? Because pretty soon we're going to lose control of it. And we ourselves, imagine looking back at Ricky V 5 years from now, and the cyborg Ricky V remembers the good old days when he was just an intellectual midget, an infant, and to his greater understanding now. When I say I want to understand the rest of the universe and how they might think out there, I mean people that evolved through different trajectories than we do, and what can they fundamentally understand that we can't? I want to do it the hard way. I want to do it with blood, sweat, and tears, right? I really want to sink my teeth into how could we possibly imagine something we can't possibly imagine. Psychedelics might be involved, I'm not sure. But, I would like to see some empirical evidence that you're tapping into something that's real and not just a perception manipulation. So that's the fundamental. I thought years ago I would write a book, Into the Mind, that would cover most of this. I can't do it. It's too expansive. But also, unless we come together from time to time on these topics, we're simply going to have divergent schools of thought that develop their own terminology, Tower of Babel. No one's going to be able to talk to each other. And the concepts might map to each other across domains of psychology and neurodevelopment, artificial intelligence, linguistics, evolutionary biology. But this is going to be a fantastic couple of years. Maybe it'll run for 5 years. I don't know. But I want to be the last one to plug in so I can turn out the lights.
Well, I've had Dennis McKenna on before. Terrence is he's been on a few times, but he had a documentary back in the day that was really good called, I think you could still find it. It's called Neurons to Nirvana: Understanding Psychedelic Medicines, and it's quite fascinating. I recommend people checking it out. But
Terrence is on our list of desired speakers, and the person I'm working with works very closely with him. So yeah, Terrence McKenna most likely will be involved. I can't say that for sure, but I'm hoping.
Yeah, well, Terrence is the brother. Dennis is the one that's unless I'm confusing the two. No, Dennis is the one that's been on my show that's still alive. Terrence is the one who had like the 8-hour lectures about psychedelics and all that stuff. But yeah, Dennis is I mean, they're both.
Oh, I'm talking about somebody else completely. I'm talking about Terrence McKenna. He's a faculty member at the University of Berkeley. And he does evolution. He's an anthropologist and evolutionary psychologist, and he goes into the evolution of language. And his point is what I said to you, right? So you're influencing my structure, I'm influencing yours. Terrence's position on my Terrence, anyway, that I'm talking about, his position is that language and humanity co-evolve. Language changed us as much as we've impacted language. and it's a very fascinating area. Terrence Deacon, I'm sorry, Terrence Deacon is my guy. So yours is Terrence, yours is another guy completely.
Yeah, Dennis McKenna, which is
Okay.
I'm trying to think, last time he was on episode 92, which was a long time ago, and then he was on episode 248, which was the
Yeah.
last time he was on, which isn't available on YouTube, but it is available on BitChute and other places. He's a very fascinating guy. He's big into, so his brother was very influential in regards to psychedelics, and then he takes more of a scientific approach. But Dennis, he does a bunch of awesome work too. Super nice guy. I disagreed with him a little bit. We actually had a very it's funny how many people I've gone along with, and I still get along with, but I've gotten along with so well throughout the year. Some of my best shows that have been with people like Scott Horton or Dennis McKenna, and then I had them on during the COVID lockdowns, and we butt heads in regards to a lot what was going on, because I kind of
That's good. That's how you learn. You can't listen. There's an old saying in evolutionary biology and academia. If you agree with everything I say, we'll at least have a cup of coffee. But if you disagree with me, then one of us is going to learn something.
That's true. Well, it's like that other saying I like: if I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm in the wrong room, right? Like, I want to be around people who are challenging the way I think and what I believe. So that's super important. You do learn some things maybe from people you agree with, but you learn a lot more talking to people you disagree with. And I think even the power of long form conversation, sometimes you learn just from expressing what you believe, right? Like, somebody will ask you a question, you've been interviewed, and then all of a sudden you're trying, and again, this goes kind of back to what you're saying about linguistics and the importance of language. Like, once you attempt to put your thoughts and ideas into words, sometimes you realize it's not as well thought out as you thought. Sometimes you think okay, I need to spend some time to really work this out, because I thought I had it all figured out, and then all of a sudden I'm asked to discuss it, and I'm trying to figure it out while I'm answering the question. That's happened to me. I've been on shows where somebody will ask me a question. I'm like, I'm not sure. And then while I'm trying to explain my position, it's evolving while I explain it. So it's language is fascinating. Noam Chomsky back in the day did some really interesting stuff with language. Obviously, he's turned into a little bit of a drinking the mainstream media Kool-Aid guy, but he back in the day, he was fascinating. And even somebody who I disagree with on some things, you can't take away the fact that he's given some value to the world with his linguistic perspectives, and also, exposing people to the work of Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud. A lot of people heard that name and for the first time from Noam Chomsky and Manufacturing Consent and whatnot, and Adam Curtis, who did amazing work in the UK. He's done some amazing films too. I think it was the Power of Nightmares. It's a really good documentary by him. But again, you don't have to agree with everybody to think that you can get some value out of what they have to share, or just listening to them. So
that's true. So Noam in particular has been a dominant force in linguistics and the consequences for humanity. And I have found that Terrence Deacon's work, it has that added edge of understanding, profound understanding that comes with understanding evolutionary processes. And it's one thing to say, oh, things are changing over time. It's the other thing to say, well, you have to have variation. It has to be heritable. If it's heritable, it's replicating. But that variation has to be related to the units of inheritance. Again, not to self-promote my paper too much, but I have some really new ideas in the paper, Who Are We and What Do We Want to Become? That solves kind of the language problem about how do we talk about these complex systems that are evolving. Because for years, people studying complex systems couldn't even identify complexity. How do you get an objective measure of how do you know when something's complex? And then this term emergence came up. Something can emerge, and you have a complex system, and it seems to be undergoing certain dynamics, and they don't seem that profound. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you seem to have this emergence. And so emergence is supposed to explain the origin of consciousness, and under the right circumstances, it can occur. to me, I look at it more like a statistician almost, right? You have simple, you have medium, you have complex systems, and then you have this other thing, all of which falls under one umbrella. The concept of a normal distribution comes to mind, but it doesn't have to, and that they all belong to this one set of systems. And under the right circumstances, yes, you will get this thing that we recognize in emergence, but to blow your mind a little, that's our perception, that's our characterization of that. Right. And so to what degree do we get to impose what we can understand on the outside world and say, because we understand the outside world with our brains, that way reflects what the outside world is doing? That means that's full stop right there to me about maybe I don't know anything. Maybe I'm humble enough that everything I've ever learned is just perception. And, maybe I am eating hot dogs and French fries instead of caviar and steak, And so when we get that deep into this question, we really, Karl Popper, the philosopher of science, refused to allow the subjective scientist into his formal calculus of science. In his formal calculus of science is one of the criticisms of his work. You can't allow subjectivity. And I proved him wrong in a paper that I wrote when I was a graduate student. I wrote the paper that showed, no, wait a minute. In Karl Popper's calculus of objectivity, he was the one that came up with hypothetical deductivism. You try to falsify your hypothesis by creating the most critical test that you can and try to falsify. You don't try to prove your hypothesis. And I love that. It's great. It's brilliant. But in that process, you start with a bolus of background knowledge. And what I recognized in Karl Popper's philosophy of science was that he was considering the individual subjective scientist when he was saying you have background knowledge B, and then you create a hypothesis H, and then you do a test T, and T has to be an actual bona fide critical test that could destroy your hypothesis based on its outcome. And from that test, then you get evidence. From the evidence, you interpret the evidence in light of the background knowledge. And my little paper, sent it to a journal of philosophy, simply said, well, what if there's 20 people with background knowledge and you put them all in the same room and compare that thought experiment to when you only have one person? The likelihood that of those 20,000 or those 20 people or 20,000 people, it's much more likely that somebody in the room is going to interpret the evidence correctly, because you have to bring in subjective error that way. So perhaps the evidence of the test, everything was done right. The hypothesis was stated clearly, the test was done correctly, the evidence is there. But what if they don't know how to interpret the evidence because they don't have sufficient background knowledge to understand what that evidence of the test is? So, I know that's a more correct formulation of Popper's philosophy of science. The journal editor wrote back and said, no one uses his philosophy anymore. This was 1990. No one uses his philosophy anymore. It's crazy. I was like, okay, I guess philosophy of science is dead. And yes, they've all kind of, given up. But here we are. Now it's 2020. And we're looking at things more almost mechanistically, but without determinism, to saying, okay, well, to what degree what am I bringing to the party of perception here? What am I imposing on my ability to understand reality? And how can we do this in a safe and productive way? Because remember, the technologists would have you plug in and just take over all of your perception. And so if they're going to take over your perception, that really doesn't matter. If you want that, plug into the matrix, go ahead, take that, blue pill, and you're done. Fine, see ya on the other side, but leave me alone, right? And not to be heroic, but to be, no, I want to do it the hard way. As caveman-like as that might seem in 5 years, I want to earn every piece of knowledge that I have where I really fundamentally know I understand it. Not that I was just given, it was a gift. Here it is, it's too easy. I want my learning process to inspire new thoughts that are originally with me. They originate with me for real, not something that I was made to think originate with me. Because otherwise I don't have any identity. I've lost my soul. And I was saying that as an evolutionary biologist. I've lost my soul. To give in to the collective. Now, I'll go with the crowd on certain things, that's fine. But more than happy to debate anyone, anywhere on the things that matter, like should we or should we not perform post-birth abortions? Should we or should we not perform abortions on kids that are 8 months in the womb? See, for me, you brought that up, and I didn't offer my opinion. My opinion is that there's a biological contract between a man and a woman after the act of insemination. If that act has happened, there's a biological contract. If a pregnancy occurs, they're both responsible for the outcome. Fine. The same way, there's a biological contract between the mother and the child to be upon, not on the moment of conception, because that's just a single cell. And our bodies have trillions of cells. Not every single cell that happens to carry a human genome has some kind of divine right or other right to become a full-fledged human. Otherwise, we would say, oh my gosh, we have to do trillions of cloning experiments and get every single cell from Ricky into a person, right? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't generalize. You can't generalize that maxim. But upon implementation, there's a biological contract between the mother and the zygote. And a lot of individual cells pass from the mother without ever implanting. A huge number of them. Okay, fine. That was the destiny, whatever chance. But once that trophoblast experience takes place, and then you start dividing, and you've got 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 cells somewhere along the way, that biological contract becomes viable. And both individuals have signed on the line biologically, so to speak. It's a good, if they've negotiated a good relationship, create a placenta, nervous system, heart, brain, then the thing starts experiencing. After that point in time, it's no longer a thing. Once it has neurologic activity, it no longer has a thing. So advanced societies such as those that are present in the United States of America should be able to figure out how to take care of unwanted kids. But the argument from the globalists is that pregnancy is a traumatic experience for women to have. We need to move towards artificial placentas, which then does what? It causes an infant that's in the fetus to not experience their own mother's hormones, to not experience their own mother's heartbeat, to not experience, the ups and downs of pregnancy with their mother. And of course, it then denies the mother the opportunity to hormonally and otherwise psychologically and spiritually bond to their baby. How many women have said that they already fell in love with their baby? Oh, you're going to love your baby the minute you see them. They say, no, I already love them. And so this recapitulation of things that we've seen so many times in sci-fi, people just forget that these sci-fi movies, they were not prescriptions for the future. They were warnings, right? Let's not do this, people. We should not do things simply because we can. We should do them because they're useful, and we should only do them if they're useful, if it's ethical. So we need to have that debate. I'm happy to talk with anybody about abortion, what it means to me, and I don't do it in a judgmental way. I know women that have had abortions that have turned right around and then became, pro-life not because of their personal horror, because they did the calculations differently for other people. It's not hypocrisy. It's learning and growth. And so the people that would manipulate us on the basis of keeping the country divided, keeping populations divided. I remember learning how Pat Buchanan was Richard Nixon's campaign advisor. And he was asked by a member of the press, how are you going to win this? He said, no, it's easy. We'll divide the country issue by issue and take the bigger half. So if there's no principles, that was Patrick Buchanan. If there's no principles in the people on the platforms, and we know that they're doing, it used to be in the 1990s and 2000s, just multivariate statistics, to say, okay, we can get this percentage of vote from this people, and we get that percentage of vote from that people. We'll formulate. They're pandering to get votes. They're not coming at it from a principled perspective. What do you think AI is capable of doing? If they could do that with just multivariate statistics, what can they do with AI, for crying out loud? And that's one of my greatest concerns, and why I'm doing this kind of high-level thinking on these courses is there are people who make a lot of money just by keeping us fractionated and separated one from another. And so Ricky, we enjoy learning. That's great. We enjoy talking with each other. Great. We have to grow up and be an adult, and we have to talk to people that we disagree with, because if we don't, then we're being manipulated and we become an agent of someone else, and we don't realize that. And if I could leave the listeners and viewers with one message, it's like it's really up to you to the degree to which you want to engage in your own future. Because if you don't engage in making your future, someone else is going to do it for you, and they're going to make a lot of money. And you're just going to wonder how we got here. That's all.
Yeah, a problem reaction solution, right? They give you an issue and then they tell you, oh, and we just happen to have the solution for this issue. Without a doubt, I'm all for building bridges, not burning them. That's it's something I say often. If I disagree with somebody on anything, I want to talk to them. Even I want to talk to them on a lot of issues that I'm just undecided on, because there are, like yourself, like the more I learn, the more I realize I have much to learn. I constantly am unsure about where I stand on so many different things, because I realize there's so many perspectives and so many thought out opinions that I have to exhaust all of them before I can honestly say, okay, I feel comfortable standing here. And even when I stand there, I'm not planting a flag there. I'm here for now. And I think that's really important. That's why I've never been a really big fan of labels. I even though I subscribe to a lot of libertarian perspectives and opinions and worldviews, I would never call myself a libertarian because there's things about classical liberals or even other different types of philosophies that I think are good and maybe I would entertain or subscribe to.
Sure.
So it's really important to kind of to be open-minded to everybody and anything, and like you were saying too about perspective, like everything's perspective. Everything, as much as I believe that masks were torturing kids, somebody who disagrees with me, they equally are sure of their stance as I am as mine, and we can't both be right, but based on their perspective and the information they've consumed and life journeys and traumas and life influences has them looking at this issue differently than me, because we're two different people who have different things, different backgrounds. So trying to understand that hopefully can get people to try to talk to one another, because like you said, if not, then it's divide and conquer, and we're just pawns in a bigger game. And I think that's what people have to realize. Sometimes I think people's hearts are in the right place. I think there's people who truly believe that climate change is an issue we have to fight for and all this stuff, or we have to stop the production of meat and because we're killing animals, and listen, I'm all for stopping factory farms and all that stuff, but people have to realize that the people who are pushing these policies, it's all about control and manipulation, and they're going to use your heart that might be in the right place as a weapon to get you to fight their battles and push their agendas. So we have to kind of wake up to that. And the work that you're doing is absolutely waking people up to that. For people listening who want to listen to your podcast on breaking science, if they want to listen or hook up with you on social media, I know you're banned at the moment on Twitter, but what other places are you available? And where is your show available?
Yeah, thank you. So Popular Rationalism at Substack is where people should sign up. All the articles are free. You can pitch in a little per month if you want to. I would certainly appreciate that because I could do more, that's all. But Popular Rationalism is where, it really kind of came into its own when I decided to write article after article after article, 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, to give people the knowledge and the language to be able to fight against mandatory vaccines for employment. That's where the rubber really hit the road. That's where it exploded. And I got such positive feedback on how useful it was. And I'm trying to give people improved tools of perception. Does that sound haughty? Does that sound like I'm better than everyone else? Because I certainly don't mean it that way. But I try to help people hone their tools of perception, I guess would be a better way to put it. And yeah, you can check out Unbreaking Science at #UnbreakingScience. I'm on YouTube and pushed out to a lot of different video outlets and so on. But I'm also doing Pulse once a week on America Out Loud, Peter McCullough's platform. And I interview 3 guests a week. I give them each 15 minutes to talk about advances in medicine or what directions medicine should go if they're a medical doctor. I speak with activists about bills that are coming out that should be, how to think about bills that are being proposed by people that want to protect individual rights versus people that want to take away individual rights. And then I also take time to talk about upcoming events, whether they're conferences like the Next Steps conference in Atlanta, Georgia, or there's a conference in Michigan in June that I'm going to be part of. And so, I'm trying to use it as a platform to promote awareness of events that people can go and meet us all in person. And that's America Out Loud Pulse. You'll find some past episodes. I think I've done that 5 weeks in a row. And of course, I'm still on Facebook, plugging away at Facebook, hoping they don't censor me so I can reach more people. The same thing that you do, just to get it out there. Turnout is pretty good in some of my Facebook groups that I've created. So there's Facebook groups for some of the IPAC EDU courses in Biology 1 and Biology 2. So you can find me in lots of places. I would encourage people mostly to go to the Substack or Substack Popular Rationalism.
Yeah, and any links that you want in the show description, send them to me. That way I can make sure I don't miss anything or forget anything. But yeah, so people, if you're listening, support Dr. Jack's work. Everybody who's been in this fight. I'm a huge fan of Dr. Peter McCullough. He came on my show, a few times, and he was also nice enough to come on the Union of the Unwanted the day that his JRE appearance was released to the public, that Monday, which was pretty cool. And I tweeted this recently, which you probably didn't see because you're banned at the moment, but I have such respect for people who are outspoken in the last couple of years, because one thing that kind of pisses me off a little bit is the fact that there's so many people in the alternative media community that are jumping, at the opportunity to call out the media for lying about their coverage of the Ukraine-Russia crisis, and oh look, they're lying, they're using fake footage, they're actually in Poland and they're telling you they're in Ukraine, they're lying about this, war profiteers and all this stuff, so they're willing to call out politicians, corporations, and the media on foreign policy and geopolitical issues. But the last couple of years, when it was hard to, because how many people are really pushing back if you say something about the media lying about Ukraine? Like, the pushback isn't nearly as bad as it was, in 2020, when you're trying to tell people that this virus isn't as dangerous as they're telling you, and that they're trying to push a vaccine on you, and there's all these other agendas. We were getting banned all over the place. We had our friends turning on us, because the truth is, we have friends and family that just don't really care about what's going on in overseas, or don't really know, so they don't have a strong opinion. But in 2020 and 2021, everybody had a strong opinion on vaccines. Everybody had a strong opinion on the lockdowns, masks. So that's when it was hard to speak out. And yet people like yourself did, people like Dr. Peter McCullough did, and so many other people in the community that have done amazing work trying to get people the truth and giving people peace of mind of knowing, I'm not going crazy. Apparently, there's people out there who are looking at this logically, like I am, and are seeing the same things, the same inconsistencies that I am. And so I give people like yourself so much credit for fighting against propaganda when it was the hardest, because everybody was turning on you, and it was causing a rift in families and friends, and getting people kicked off and whatnot. So hats off to you. Hopefully people support your work. Hopefully I can help connect you with some people, and IPAC and all your projects keep on growing.
Thank you, Ricky. You've been a true friend since we first talked, and I've loved sending you people like Peter and Jesse, and you've done great things with them and for them. So I love your true heart, man. Your real true heart. You're in it all for the right reasons. And thank you. That's all I want to say is thank you.
Well, one thing that I think also got exposure in 2020 was that people like yourself and Peter McCullough and Dr. Jessica Rose and all these other people, which listeners, I think I've said this a few times on the show, you can thank Dr. Jack for why the fan favorite, Dr. Jessica Rose, is a regular on this show. You're the one who first exposed me to her work and suggested her coming on. But I think your heart and all, and Dr. Peter McCullough and everybody else, when I hear people talk about, the misinformation and the anti-vaxxers, it's all about money. It's like, money, what are you talking about? Like, there is very little to gain, if anything, in being outspoken on these topics. Everybody turns on you. People who know nothing about the topic jump to the conclusion that you're wrong, even though we've done much more research and on the topics. People are passionate about the topic. It gets people going. It pisses people off. It's really hard to discuss these topics openly without being criticized or people calling you a conspiracy theorist or whatever. So the fact that you guys still did it anyways, especially when you're talking about PhDs, people who are respected scientists and doctors, and yet they're still willing to share their perspectives, because how many doctors out there knew this was, there's something that didn't make sense, but for their own personal reasons we're too afraid to speak up. There's a lot of them out there, and not even just doctors. There's just the average people. I mean, I had family members and friends of mine who told me, like, oh, you know what, like, I agree with you, but I'm not going to say anything because everybody gets mad, or people will jump down your throat or whatever, or call you a Trumper, and then everything became political, where it's just like, I'm just sharing my opinion on one thing, and yet they're immediately deciding if my opinion on that one thing is influenced by me being for or anti-Trump. It's like, wait, what does Trump or any politician have to do with if this makes sense or not? So hats off to all you guys who had the balls to speak out.
Well, thank you. One of the things that people can do to free themselves from that is to recognize that they're making that association in their mind, that they think that they can predict what you think about other things based on some aspect about you, and it's a form of bigotry, and nobody wants to be a bigot. No one wants to be a bigot. So, thank you for that. Jessie's fantastic. She published in my journal, Science, Public Health Policy, and the Law. That's where her first two studies on COVID, the VAERS data analysis, came out. Those are all objectively peer reviewed. I didn't handle the second one because by then she was working with IPAC as a research fellow. And, Jessie, more than anybody else, has made Jessie. She's just fantastic. She's just one of my favorite people. So when it comes to the money thing, you've got to take a mature look at this. Money is a tool by which to get things done. That's all I look at it. I'm not in this for cash. I've sold 3 houses. I have sold 3 houses for IPAC to do the research over 4 years. I think it was over 4 years. And so this is not a way to make money. This is a way to get revenue to be able to affect change and create things and provide a forum for humanity to explore itself and the world around it. So, it's a fascinating experience. I couldn't have done it any other way. I wouldn't have done it any other way, even whether there was revenue flowing or not. When I see kids getting hurt, it's second nature to me. And I knew they were coming after kids. They waited till the end. They waited till no one's paying attention. And that's why you really have to do it for me. Do it for the kids. Do it for the kids. They don't deserve to be experimented on with these experimental biologics. They should be protected by the U.S. Code of Federal Regulation, but they're not, so it's your job to do it. Speak up, be loud, be consistent, be clear, and please let me know you did it. Drop by a Substack article and say, hey, Dr. Jack, I made a phone call. Hey, Dr. Jack, I wrote a letter. So then I can give you a little kudos. And the kids are counting on you. The kids are absolutely counting on you to show up. And, once they have a legal precedent for federal vaccine mandates for children that are not related to school entry, then they're going to mandate everything. And there's a lot of stake here. So thanks for having me, Ricky.
What breaks my heart is the fact that as adults or as parents, we're supposed to protect our kids, and now we're at the point where we have to protect the kids from their parents, because there's some parents that have just been brainwashed into believing that their kids should be masked until vaccinated, and it's like, that kid doesn't know any better. He doesn't have the ability yet to process everything that's going on and all the information and come up with, a good conclusion on what's safe or unsafe or what's healthy or not healthy. And the fact that parents who they're supposed to trust some parents are saying they can't wait to get the next booster for their child. It breaks my fucking heart so much, because it's like that poor kid, like he doesn't know any better. His mom's telling him to be afraid. His dad's telling him to be afraid. His mom's telling him, pull that mask over your nose, wash your hands, and it's like, what type of long-term trauma is that poor kid gonna have to deal with? So it's heartbreaking. So hopefully we're all contributing to creating a ripple effect of information and open-mindedness, and hopefully opening people's eyes to what's really going on. And so thank you so much, Dr. Jack. Sorry, I can't stop talking.
No, that's okay. Listen, I want to say I agree with Semmelweis. You should probably wash your hands. That's hand hygiene is really good. Let's do that. Okay, let's continue to teach our kids to wash hands at least. And if you want to mask your kid, please do it in a way that doesn't scare the crap out of them. I agree. All right, and they're being socialized differently with teachers that are covering their face. You can't get that feedback emotion of a smile. Yes, you did right. I mean, it's really, really, really bad what we've done, and hopefully it won't have too profound and long-lasting an effect. So I got a jet, but thank you so much, Ricky. I'm going to look forward to sharing this around, and thanks so much.
Yeah, enjoy your Friday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Yeah, and I'll send you the links once it's up and live. Thanks. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks, man.